90 seconds. Think about the length of 90 seconds this morning. A minute and a half. What can you do in 90 seconds? Think about how long waiting for 90 seconds would be. On April 11th of 1970, these three gentlemen boarded the Apollo 13 and went to try to land on the moon for the third time. On the second day of the flight, we became very familiar with these words. Houston, we've got a problem. An oxygen tank had exploded on the command module, and NASA authorities had two choices. How are they going to get these three astronauts back to the Earth? Well, one was to do a direct abort and turn around and send it right back. The other option was to take it and let it go all the way to the moon, wrap around the moon, and let the moon slingshot it back to Earth. The explosion caused much damage to the aircraft, and so they did not have the resources that they would normally have on the day 2 of flight. They pretty much had to shut the entire spacecraft down to take it around the moon and bring it back and get it ready to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. They had limited power. They didn't have any cabin heat. There was very little water. And most of this is portrayed very well in a movie called Apollo 13. Well, during re-entry, and one of the plot twists or one of the plot lines in the movie talks about they kept worrying about the angle in which the spaceship was going to come down. Was it going to be too shallow and skip back off into space, or was it going to be too steep and burn up the spacecraft? Well, there's a critical moment in the descent where, because of ionization, these ions come around the spaceship, and there's 4.5 minutes of blackout. Houston can't communicate with the spaceship, and the spaceship can't communicate with Houston. And so on that day that they returned, the 4.5 minute mark came. And Houston sent up a signal. Apollo 13, this is Houston. Do you read me? For 90 seconds, it was completely silent. They didn't know what happened. The longer it went, the more chances were that Apollo 13 was not going to return. Now, we know the end of the story. And we know that shortly afterward, at the 6-minute mark, 90 seconds later, Mission Control heard the voices crackle over the intercom. Houston, this is Apollo 13. Do you read? The place went crazy. But think about those 90 seconds for just a moment. You're a wife, a mom or a dad, a friend, a child of the astronauts. What was that 90 seconds? They all knew the drill. They knew 4.5 minutes was how long it was going to take. And imagine what those 90 seconds felt like. There's a similar communications blackout in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. For 400 years, there had not been a prophet in Israel. There was nobody to tell God's people, hey, I'm coming. And some of the people, probably some of the faithfully devoted ones, said, heaven, this is earth. Do you read me? God, are you still up there?
Then everybody will see the Son of Man come on clouds with great power and glory. He will send out his angels to gather his chosen ones from all over the earth, from the farthest ends of earth and heaven. 400 years, nothing. First century Israel were an oppressed people. They lived under the Roman government. They were dark. Maybe some of them never thought at that moment that the prophecies that were given in the Old Testament were never going to come true. They were wondering, and yet they wanted to. Some people prepared. The religious people prepared for the coming of the Messiah. And there were 5 groups and 5 ways they prepared. First of all, you had the Sadducees. They were the upper crust of the priests in the temple, and they were more concerned with politics than religion. All they worried about was, is the Roman Empire happy? Because as long as the Roman Empire is happy, I still have a job. And I can keep on being top dog. Then you had the
Pharisees.
The Pharisees, sorry. They prepared their life. They had written laws. God had given them the laws, and they started writing laws upon laws upon laws upon laws. So they wouldn't break God's laws. And probably by the time first century came, they started thinking that men's rules were the way to prepare their lives for God. And so they followed the man-made rules that they had made to not break God's law. Then you had the Zealots. The Zealots were getting prepared. They wanted a battle. Their Messiah that was coming, he was going to be on a horse, and he was going to have his swords drawn, and he was going to conquer and get rid of these Roman people who had kept them under their thumbs. Then you had the Essenes. They were the doomsday preppers. They decided they were going to go, and they were going to go to the caves, and they were going to sit in the caves until the Messiah came. They were looking for a warrior/priest in their Messiah. And yet there were still some devoted people who were faithful and probably prepared their lives and got close to God in their relationship. And we see their names. There are very few of them that we see their names in the Bible's Christmas story. Zechariah, Elizabeth, Mary, Joseph, Simeon, and Anna. These were people who literally had faith that someday the Messiah would come. Advent is a season of waiting. The word Advent means come. And there are 2 different kinds of Advent when we talk at this time of season. The first Advent started 2,000 years ago when Jesus came to earth. He came incarnate. He became, which means God in flesh. God came down and was one of us. He was Emmanuel, God with us. The second one we are still waiting for, even in 2014. It is the second coming, the day when Jesus glorious appeared in the eastern sky as like he ascended up to heaven. And we have a great representative of this, our stained glass window. Every Sunday we can look up there and remember that there is a day when Jesus is going to come and take us home with him. So my question is, who are you this Advent season? Are you the Sadducees who are concerned more with what the world thinks of you to keep your positions? Are you the Pharisees that you think the laws that men gave and the rules that men have written to not break God's rules are more important? That's the way you're preparing? Are you the Zealots who are ready to go to battle against the government that you are under? Are you a Essenes, the ones who are the doomsday prepper? You watch the news every night, and every little event you see, Jesus is coming any moment now. Or are you the faithful ones who are sitting faithfully building your relationship with God and preparing for his next coming? Advent is a time of preparation, a waiting time, and who here is very patient? We don't like to wait. As Christians in 2014, we are once again waiting for the second coming of Christ.
In Mark 13, that's where we're going to spend some time today. Mark 13, 32 through 37. Jesus is speaking of his return after he'd come the first time. No one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows. And since you don't know when that time will come, be on guard, stay alert. The coming of the Son of Man can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. When he left home, he gave each of his slaves instructions about the work they were to do, and he told the gatekeeper to watch for his return. You too must keep watch, for you don't know when the master of the household will return, in the evening, at midnight, before dawn, or at daybreak. Don't let him find you sleeping when he arrives without warning. So I say to you, and I say to everyone, watch for him. Jesus' words are really clear this morning. Be on guard, stay alert, watch for him. Pastor Pam just mentioned, how many of you are patient? I'm not. We do not like waiting. It's always interesting to watch the waiting room, especially now, this day of smartphones and phones. I mean, people now, even at the doctor's office, they can just kind of be fidgeting around instead of reading all the magazines and all that. We don't like waiting. We don't like sitting around. And one of the things that can happen while we are waiting is difficult. And one of the things that we can happen is we can be distracted. Look what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. Remember the Garden of Gethsemane? Jesus took his 3 disciples to go pray with him, and he said, wait and watch and pray with me while I go and pray. Well, Jesus comes back a little bit later, and they're sleeping. They got distracted. They were tired. They were sleeping. And so Jesus warns us, don't be distracted while you're waiting. Prepare your hearts. Be on guard. Stay alert. Another thing that can happen is we can look for all the signs. We don't have to go too far to see people who do that. They look for all of the signs of Jesus coming. Well-meaning believers, they'll twist things and say, well, this means this, and this means this, and so this means Jesus is coming back on July 14th of 2015. Now, do not say that Pastor Dale said that Jesus is coming back on July 15th of 2015, because I did not say that, because you'll see in just a moment, no man knows the day or the hour. And it concerns me that we do this, we get to looking at the signs because we miss the important things in looking at the signs. Here's the important things. I believe that Jesus is returning. I believe that Jesus' return is imminent. That means it could happen now, it could happen now. But I also believe that Jesus' return could have happened for the last 2,000 years. He's just decided to wait. And waiting is difficult. Waiting is difficult when you know that Jesus could rescue us out of here at any moment, and he doesn't. It's difficult. I also believe, if Jesus' return was close when he was here, and Paul tells us that his return could be any moment. Matter of fact, the believers in first century Israel were saying, is Jesus coming? Is Jesus coming? And so Paul wrote letters to say that Jesus is coming. He's coming back. And so the really important things that I want us to get out of this morning as we prepare and wait for his coming is this. That number 1, Jesus is returning. Number 2, he wants us to be ready. Number 3, he wants us to be alert, on guard, and on watch. Remember, Jesus said that no one, let me repeat that, no one knows the hour, the day, not even Jesus himself. Can you believe that? Jesus is the one who's coming back, and not even he knows when God's going to say, okay, time to go get him. That's amazing. Mark 13:5 says this, Jesus replied, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name claiming, I am the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. And as I've stated, Jesus' return is just around the corner, and we have to be on guard. We have to be patient. How many times when you were a kid did you hear your mom say, "Just wait"? Just wait. We do not like to wait. We are impatient. Think about a famous commercial, J.G. Wentworth. It's my money, and I want it now. I think most of us would paraphrase and say this. It's my patience, and I want it now. We are so impatient, and it is so tough to wait. And yet this is exactly what God has called us as believers to do. He wants us to be prepared for His return. And so what does that mean? Well, this past couple weeks, we've been preparing for winter in the Shenandoah Valley. Now, that sound coming from someone who lived in Pennsylvania and Indiana and Michigan and New York, that kind of sounds strange that we're preparing for winter in the Shenandoah Valley. But after the last couple of winters we've had here in the Shenandoah Valley, even this northern boy is getting a little tired of the cold. And so a couple weeks ago, we took our car to Hershey Garage. We had Hershey Tire. We had a problem. For some reason, the windshield wiper pump wasn't working. And so when you would squirt the juice on the windshield, all you just see is the wipers go like this, and there'd still be salt all over the windshield. So we're like, you got to go fix this. So turns out all it was a fuse. I hate easy stuff like that. And we got the oil changed, and we had them check the antifreeze. Because last winter, because it was so cold last winter, I always was worried, is our car going to freeze? Is the antifreeze going to freeze? Well, no worries. We're good down to, we're really good. We're not good just for 0 or minus 10 or minus 20 or minus 30. Our antifreeze is good all the way to minus 40. Now, I don't ever want to experience those kinds of temperatures again in my life. We were in Indiana at the time. It was my first year at Indiana Wesleyan, and it was just after Christmas. The temperature in Indiana, not wind chill, set state records all over the state of Indiana at minus 36 degrees. That was cold. Now, we thought that was cold, and that was just like a week. We had a one really cold week there. Well, then, several years later, the Lord moved us to New York. And 1 week, our furnace went out. And that week, it was like minus 25 almost all week. Minus 25. The temperature made it to, the high was like minus 5. But the lows were like minus 25. A couple weeks later, Pam went out. She looked at the thermometer on the thing, and she walked from the house to the church. We literally lived from the front door to here from the church. That's all the what. She didn't put a jacket on. She goes, and people were like, "You're nuts! It's crazy." She goes, "Well, I walked out. It said it was 15." And I'm like, "Pam, it said it was minus 15." But when tell you what, when it gets to 15 after being minus 25 for 3 weeks, guess what? 15 degrees feels warm when you're going out in just an open coat. It was amazing. So we get ready. We take care of those things. We got ready for Snowmageddon, and I heard all about Snowmageddon at Walmart this week. Fortunately, Laura said she was in her little pharmacy box, so she didn't have to deal much with it. But so one of the things I put up this week was that driveway is a long way, and sometimes you have no idea where the driveway is. So I put up little guiding posts so we knew exactly where the driveway was. So that was done. We got the snow. I was like, we've been having a problem with the snowblower. The wheel wouldn't quite stay on, and it kept everything that we tried wouldn't work. So finally, I pulled. I knew it was on the other side, so I pulled that little pin out of the thing, and I went to Tractor Supply. I've never been to Tractor Supply. That was so fun because all these farm toys were like, man, Robert would have a blast with all these. This is great. And so finally, I I'm like, ma'am, can you point me in the direction of these? And she pointed all the way to the back. I'm like, I went to the back. I'm like, and I looked down. I was like, so that's what a linchpin is. Now, if you want to know what a linchpin is, it's right there. That's what that looks like. I had no idea. This city boy received an education. So we got her. So I decided. Well, they didn't have them at Tractor Supply Company. They said, well, why don't you go over to Augusta Co-op? I'm like, okay, I've never been to a co-op before. Let's go do that. So we went over to the co-op, and we're like, wow, look at those cool gloves. I bet those would be really good for shoveling snow. So I bought some of those and got over to where all the linchpins were, and they had them. And you know what? I'm not going to buy just one. I'm going to be prepared. They were only like $1.50 a piece. So I'm like, I'm going to get 4. That way we'll be ready in case I break one, because I've managed to break them. So I made sure that I had them. And so we prepare ourselves. And many of you have done similar things over this past week. And I'll tell you what, on Thursday morning I woke up and I saw, I looked in my email account and it said, Roger Rexroad has tagged you in a post on Facebook. I'm like, what in the world? And so I go on Facebook and it says, Hey Dale, hate to break it to you, but those Cowboys are going to whoop on your Eagles today. Well, it was the other way around. But we had a great time because we watched both games. James likes the Lions, so we watched the Lions game first, and then we watched the Eagles game, and it was a great afternoon as we just kind of spent time around there, around the house. And then we prepare our home for the holidays. Yes, we have an artificial tree at home with all those blue, green, and purple lights, and there's a whole other story involved with that. But don't get me wrong, I love Christmas. I love Christmas. I love that it means that Jesus came to earth as Emmanuel, God in the flesh. But sometimes I get a little disturbed when I walk into Kohl's on October 30th. This happened this year. Walked into Kohl's and I opened the door and I'm like, no, it can't be all this red and silver and garland. I'm like, it's not even Halloween yet. We're pushing the seasons. We need to prepare our hearts. That's the most important thing. Isaac Watts in the hymn Joy to the World says, Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. And catch this line. Let every heart prepare him room. If you are not preparing your heart for Jesus coming, both his first and second, all the Christmas presents in the world, all the Christmas trees, all the decorations are nothing. We get so caught up on it. I love this. I never realized it until I started reading through the verses of Joy to the World. But do you realize that Joy to the World, and I've said this before, and James says, so Dad, why don't we sing it at other times besides Christmas? I'm like, I don't know why. I forget about it. But this is a great hymn that not only speaks of Jesus' first coming, but more importantly, it speaks of his second coming. There is a day when he is coming to break open the sky and appear just like that. It's so interesting. Normally on the first Sunday of Advent, for many years, the first Sunday of Advent was always this, especially when we lived up in New York, it was always this gray, cloudy day that just kind of set up that oppressive, Pastor Pam talked about the Romans just oppressing the people. And so many times it was just a gray, cloudy day, and I said, this is setting it up perfectly. But I think this morning it's kind of fun that God cooperated with us and has that sun shining through the window when we remember that Jesus is coming back and we need to prepare our hearts for the coming King.
Actually, God really does want us to be doomsday preppers, but not in the way when we watch the show about doomsday preppers. But he wants us, there are two main things he wants us to do. First of all, is to grow our relationship with Christ. Are we reading the Bible? Are we having quiet moments? The psalmist tells us, be still and know that I am God. Taking those quiet times. Are you just enjoying fellowship with Christ? Or coming to church? The way of growing, one of the most important things that we can do as Christians is come to church and be with other Christians. Iron sharpens iron. Those people can comfort you, or you can comfort them. It's a way. It's important to be a part of your Christian walk. And here's the thing. Most of the religious leaders in the first century Israel were not being devoted. They were not worshiping and growing their life closer to God. And they missed the coming of the first advent, the coming of the Messiah. The second thing that we need to do is tell as many people about Christ. Our goal as Christians is we should not want to go to heaven by ourselves. We want to go to heaven and we want to take everybody we know. Because that is an important way of growing with Christ. And it's going to be, how are you going to feel if you're in heaven and you know people are not there? Christ commands us. In Matthew 28:18 through 20 says, Jesus came and told his disciples, I have given you all the authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always to the ends of the earth. Acts 1 we read, but you will receive the power of the Holy Spirit come upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea, Samaria, and all to the ends of the earth. So today I want to once again think, who do we know that we want to take and who we want our friends to be ready, them be ready when the Messiah comes once again.
I said that we don't like waiting. And even sometimes, I find, one of the things that I find is that we're really in a hurry a lot of times. We're in a hurry to go nowhere. And when I point the finger at you guys, I'm pointing, if you saw me on the roads, look out. I am a madman. But this morning as we go into worship, we're going to spend some time in worship. We're going to sing a song that we sang right before the message. But I want you to think, which one of those five are you this morning? Are you the Sadducee who's just looking out for your way of power? You just kind of try and hold on to the status quo? Are you the Pharisee? Sadducee and Pharisee. Pharisee, are you a Pharisee? And I tell you what, again, I point three fingers at myself. I am a rules person. I love rules because rules make things really easy. You just have to drive with me, and I can't stand the way most people drive on the road because they don't follow the rules. Just follow the rules. That's all I'm asking. You know what? God's convicting me even as I speak of that. And I'm more willing to follow his rules than to grow in my relationship with him. Are you a zealot saying, yep, let's just overtake the world by military force? Are you in a scene? Are you studying quietly in the caves, studying God's word, but not telling anybody about it? Or are you like Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph, and Anna and Simeon, a faithful, devoted follower of Jesus Christ, studying his word, reading, praying, worshiping him, and telling other people about him? like I said, sometimes we're so in a hurry, but this morning as we finish up, I just want to take some time and sing the song again, if you all stand.